Renewable Portfolio Standard is a policy that incentivizes renewable energy projects. It's no coincidence that our neighboring states that have strong renewable energy policies are also top competitors in the renewable energy market. Specifically, a Renewable Portfolio Standard sets a requirement that a certain percentage of energy from a utility or a state comes from renewable sources. Virginia's RPS was enacted in 2007. It's a voluntary standard. The baseline for that is 2007, which means that all the percentages for future years are based off 2007 data. So whatever the utilities provided in energy for the year 2007. Again, it's a voluntary standard. It's not mandatory, unlike many of our neighbors. And the intent was to make Virginia's air and water cleaner and reducing the Commonwealth's greenhouse gas emissions. The hope was that by providing financial incentives to utilities, the utilities would include renewable energy in their portfolio mix, thereby spurring solar panel arrays and wind farm projects here in Virginia. Each company's goals are based on how much electricity sold in 2007, as I mentioned. The Renewable Portfolio Standard started in 2010 with 4%, so 4% of their energy coming from renewable energy, and then going in incremental steps thereafter. 7% in 2016, 12% in 2024, and 15% in 2025. Eligible sources include solar, wind, biomass, waste to energy, tides, geothermal, wave motion, municipal solid waste, and hydropower. Solar power and onshore winds receive double credit. What that means is, let's say you have a 100 megawatt onshore wind farm. You will actually get credit like that was a 200 megawatt project. So it doubles the amount of energy from that one single project. The idea is just to bolster solar and wind power. Offshore wind, it gets triple credit. So again, using that 100 megawatt example, that 100 megawatt project would look like a 300 megawatt project to meet the RPS statute. If participating companies meet these requirements, they are eligible to get a bonus, which is paid by us, the ratepayers. So what's Virginia's progress? Unfortunately, it's very dim. 97% of the energy that has come online since 2007 has been natural gas. Natural gas is not a renewable energy source. The first 2 years covered by the RPS, 2010 and this year, the utilities have taken advantage of the weaknesses in the law to get big bonuses without actually investing in any new renewable energy source here in Virginia. As I mentioned, 97% of new generation has been natural gas. However, Dominion has made a few slight changes or made some progress. For example, they will be using biomass in the new Wise County coal plant that they're building in Southwest Virginia. They are planning on converting 3 small coal plants over to biomass. They have also proposed a 4 megawatt solar project in Halifax, and they have also proposed a 33 megawatt community solar project that is actually going before the State Corporation Commission right now for approval. But those are insignificant, again, compared to the 97% from natural gas. Yet, they're meeting the RPS, and at high cost to us. Dominion will earn $38 million for meeting the RPS with decades-old facilities, many of which are out of state. They were just approved for this week. So that's $38 million from you and I. We shouldn't have to pay utilities bonuses for buying renewable energy from decades-old existing facilities that are providing benefits like jobs and cleaner air and water to residents of other states. They should be using that money, they should be getting bonuses for only making renewable energy here in Virginia. And something has to be done, clearly. That's why this year the environmental community will be working on a package of bills to make the RPS work the way it was initially intended to do so. The work we do this year will lay the foundation to push for a mandatory renewable portfolio standard in the future. So we need to make our renewable portfolio standard stronger. We're going to be doing this by, like I said, have a suite of bills. The first one it includes a bill to make the utilities reporting documents more transparent and readily available to the public, while another bill will focus specifically on strengthening the statute itself. For the reporting requirements bill, right now, this law just states that they need to submit a compliance report yearly, but it doesn't list out what exactly they need to put in that report. And in 2010, Appalachian Power Company, their report just simply said, yes, we're meeting the requirements, without having to provide any evidence or proof. So we want to change this. We feel like there needs to be some explicit requirements in the bill. So what we are proposing is that they should need to list out in this compliance report they submit every year where the project is. Is it out of state or in state? That's more what we're looking for. You know, we don't care if it's Pennsylvania or Delaware, but we do care is it Virginia versus another state. We also want to know what fuel type it is. Right now they're meeting the RPS through biomass and hydro, which again obviously falls under the statute. From the environmental perspective, we want to see more solar and wind. And then the third piece from the reporting requirement is we want to know how old these facilities are. Through discovery and law proceedings that have happened over the last few months, we've learned that many of the projects are actually very old hydro that were all built before World War II. They shouldn't be getting bonuses for projects that A, are already running and are that old. We also want to make sure that this report is readily available to the public. Right now, the only way I was able to obtain the reports was by asking the utilities. So, and they handed them over, but it just needs to be more transparent. And if every single ratepayer is paying this bonus to the utilities, we should all have access to these reports. The second piece of legislation is a heavier lift in a lot more detail. So there are 5 components to this piece. First, it will only allow credits for sources built in the year the RPS was passed or later. This will help to ensure that the law spurs development of new renewable energy sources, not just rewards the company for buying renewable energy certificates from old facilities such as the dams that were built before World War II. Another piece is that it'll only allow energy from Virginia facilities or in facilities off our coast, such as offshore wind. By encouraging utilities to generate or buy renewable energy produced here, we can ensure that Virginia's businesses, employees, and ratepayers benefit from the jobs and clean air those projects would bring to the Commonwealth. The third piece is we'll require energy to be generated in the same year or the year before it is applied to meeting the RPS goals. While it makes sense to allow companies to make up for year-to-year variability by banking recs, for a short time period, it simply doesn't make sense to allow companies to apply energy generated in 2010 to the renewable energy goal in 2020, as is currently allowed. So basically what they can do now is that they can buy renewable energy credits, and they are doing this. They can buy renewable energy credits today and save them kind of in, a savings account, and then they can apply them later on. So they can apply them in, 2012, 2013, 14, 15. And so we want to stop that because, again, that is really not providing an incentive for building renewable energy here. That is just helping them game the system. The last 2 pieces that this bill will do is, first, it'll require the utilities to meet the RPS goals with a certain portion of energy coming from wind and solar. Again, from the environmental perspective, this is our bottom line. This is what we want to see. We know that there are other pieces of the other energy sources that fall under the RPS, but we want to see more wind and solar, and that's not happening right now. So we wanted to specifically put in a carve-out where some of the RPS needs to be met by wind and solar. The way that what we're thinking is that beginning in 2017, 20% of the energy the utilities use towards the RPS must come from wind and solar. And starting in 2023, 40% must come from wind and solar. Now again, these numbers aren't 40% of their energy should come from wind and solar. This is 40% of the 15%. I know it's really confusing, but which we've calculated down, it's only like 2%. So we're really asking that 2%, by 2025, 2% of their energy comes from wind and or solar. It's a really minuscule amount, but it's something they're not doing right now. And I should also mention, I forgot to mention on this slide, these three pieces, talking about has to be built before after 2007, has to be built in Virginia, and also the banking of RECs. We've added in exceptions, so anything that, for example, Dominion owns in North Carolina could be included under this law, and any renewable energy credits that they currently have banked, we would also allow. So we do have those built-in exceptions, but this would be moving forward. And we would also, Appalachian Power Company has signed 2 power purchase agreements with 2 land-based wind farms in Illinois and Indiana. And so while at least they're moving forward with some winds, unfortunately it's not here in Virginia, we do want to reward them for doing a little bit better than what Dominion is doing. So we also allow them to continue to use the energy from those 2 wind farms to meet our RPS.
Did you have a question? Looks like there was a second point on the slide you just skipped past about retiring.
Oh, thank you. So yes, the second bullet on this slide, and this is the 5th and final piece of our bill, would require the companies to retire renewable energy certificates for all energy used to meet the RPS. The State Corporation Commission, which is the utility regulating agency for the state, has ruled that under the current version of the law, the environmental attributes of renewable energy can theoretically be counted twice. This means that the energy from that generation source can be counted, and then the renewable energy credits for the project can be sold on the market and be counted a second time. This isn't happening. Neither one of the investor-owned utilities are taking advantage of this loophole, but it does exist and we need to close it. Because again, at the end of the day, it's not incentivizing new renewables, and in particular, it's not incentivizing renewables in Virginia. So now we're ready to introduce our bills. What happens next? Well, session starts on January 11th, 2012. It will be a 60-day long session. And what happens is that basically once the bill is introduced, it gets assigned to a committee. All of our bills, our energy bills, go before Commerce and Labor. The bill will then go to committee. The committee will debate it, discuss the legislation, and they will take a vote. If they happen to pass the bill, then the bill will go to the floor of that particular house, where it will also be debated and discussed, and then voted upon. If it's passed, then it will go to the other chamber, and then the whole process begins again. So, yes?
I had a question. Do we have anybody to sponsor the reform legislation that we want to see on the RPS yet?
Yes, we are working on patrons for both bills.
We have a patron
Yeah.
for that. Who are they?
Well, we're in discussion with folks right now, so I don't feel comfortable mentioning any names at this
So
point.
we don't have it nailed down yet.
Exactly.
In the process.
Yeah, we're just in discussions. So as I mentioned, our bills will go before Commerce and Labor. This is the makeup of the committee from last year, minus some folks that retired. We don't actually know what the makeup of the committees will be this year. There is still some discrepancy about who's going to be chairing the committees. The Republicans would say that they have full control and that they will be controlling the committee chairmanships, but the Democrats are saying they should be doing power sharing. So we'll see how that all plays out in the next couple of weeks. But for now, it looks like Senator John Watkins will be chairing Commerce and Labor. And this is the list of the folks that are currently sitting on that committee. Again, the makeup, especially on the Senate side, will change because it's going from a democratically controlled Senate to Republican controlled, then there will be one less Democratic seat and one more Republican seat. So this makeup will change further than what we see now. And we'll know closer to session. So now you've heard about the bill, you've heard about where it's going to go, but we still need your help to get this done. We cannot make this happen without your efforts. And to do that, we need to move our targets. And we move our targets by writing letters to the editor, having meetings with them as their constituents, and making phone calls to their offices. I know you'll learn all about lobbying later today, but I just wanted to give a quick highlight on why these are so important. Most of the senators follow their local media very closely, so you can be sure that if you're getting your letter to the editor in their particular paper, they know it, they've read it, their staff is aware of it. And it's really good for them to know that their constituents care about these particular issues. Also, having a meeting speaks volumes. Just the fact that you've taken time out of your day to go and meet with them about this particular issue, they know that their constituents care and that this is something that is very important. So continuing to have meetings and also following that up with phone calls, getting your friends and family and neighbors and colleagues to call as well. The more letters and phone calls that we can generate from their district, then the more they know this is something they need to pay attention to. As an organization, we can blast emails and calls to our members, but the most effective ask comes from someone they know. Talk to your neighbors, colleagues, schoolmates, everyone, and help us spread the word. And with that, I'll take questions.
I got one more. Are there going to be a ranking of people you think can be persuaded to support our issues as everything shakes out up here? Because, you know, some people can't move them. The bulldozers won't move them. And some people are persuaded them. So we really ought to put our resources where we think we can do the most good.
Absolutely. You know, and that's something that we talk about internally. All of the groups that are, that will be working on these bills, we, have vote charts and understand, who we need to talk to. But as members of the community, as members of the environmental community, it's important for everyone to go and talk to their legislators. So we're just focusing on the broader. We want everyone to go and talk to their legislators, whether they're on Commerce and Labor or not. They need to start hearing about this and hearing about really the travesty of what's happening. I mean, Dominion is getting $38 million for doing nothing on renewables here in Virginia, and everyone in the General Assembly should be outraged by that.
To add to that, you're exactly on point. I'm Lisa Guthrie with the Virginia League of Conservation Voters, and I just want to emphasize it's going to be critical this session. There are some people who got elected that never had to go on record on any of these issues that matter to us. They took advantage of, a national discontent with the political situation, and some of these candidates were swept in without ever stating a position on any of these items as well as others of the public interest. So I think it's critical that we do heavy lifting, that we, more than ever, communicate with our legislators. And it's more effective if you contact your own legislator, even if you don't think he or she can be moved. Because the last thing we want to happen in the General Assembly, for them to be able to say, no one has contacted me from my district. This is not an issue for me at home, and I don't have to pay any attention to it. I can vote as I wish. And so we have got to put the pressure on. We've got to do more accountability this year. And we think there's going to be some very interesting votes because of the rift within the Republican Party in particular for the right wing and those that are more moderate. And we're going to have to force some of these votes on some of these issues. And so it's critical that you talk to your legislator and say, I'm a constituent, this matters to me.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And just, I mean, to add on to what Lisa, or emphasize what Lisa said, even if you are a constituent of a Republican senator or delegate, please go and talk to them. I mean, you know, we care about the environment, and maybe, you know, certain legislators, doesn't matter what party, certain people, they may not have an interest in that, and that's fine, but this has so many different pieces for people to be outraged over. I mean, there's the consumer angle. Us as ratepayers are paying $38 million to the utilities to do nothing. Go and talk to your legislators about that. If you feel like the environmental angle isn't the best one, well, go to talk to them about the cost and how much we are spending on this and how these particular bills are going to make that better. You know, we support giving them these incentives if they're doing the right thing, but right now they're not. And that's what we need to fix.
Hi, is there something in this regulatory proposal, I think I saw it in the book, but I just wanted to ask, that would lean towards that would require the utilities to take energy from solar panels in people's houses? And if there isn't, is the coalition planning on putting something forth? Because in other parts of the country, it's generating all kinds of entrepreneurial and interesting arrangements where people are putting solar, you can get a solar installation on your house and pay $1,000, another entity owns it, and yet you get to buy your power off your solar. Stuff like that. Is something like that?
Well, so last year, Delegate Toscano had a bill passed. It was House Bill 1686, and that's actually how the 33 megawatt community solar project that Dominion has proposed has moved forward. It's a pilot program. It's a 5-year pilot program, and it's an alternative to net metering, and net metering is what you're referring to. Mm-hmm. So several of the environmental organizations had worked for years to try to get a net metering bill passed, and so finally this is the compromise that they came up with last year. So 30 megawatts of that project are for, Dominion is going to be leasing space on commercial, industrial, and organizational and locality properties. So they won't own the lands or the buildings they're using, but they will own the solar panels, and they're going to put up to 30 megawatts of solar panels. They will lease the rooftops or land. There might be some land mounted instead of roof mounted. And so that they can study their words, so they can study the effects of solar on their system. The other 3 megawatts of that pilot project are for anyone who currently has solar panels on their roofs. And there's all of the folks in Virginia that have solar on their roofs, it amounts to 2.7 megawatts, so everyone will be included in that project. And they will be looking at some kind of special tariff, like a feed-in tariff or something. And this is as an alternative to net metering. It's not the best. Net metering is something you always want, but when Dominion has as much power as it does, this is the best we could get for right now.
Chelsea, if there still is, it's
still
not
good,
as though
yeah.
there's 3 megawatts and then that's the cap. There still is net metering laws on the books. So if you have a solar system, you can sell, you can use a portion of it to offset what you would typically be paying. If you create more than you use, you can sell some of it back to Dominion on the grid. That part does remain. It's a weak law, and this actually came from us trying to allow folks to aggregate net metering projects, which is the ideal scenario that so many other states have.
I just had one other point. A couple years ago, my delegate asked me what she could do for me. She's a Democrat. And I said, stop taking money from Dominion Resources. She gets $2,500 a year I'm sure every member
They all
of the General Assembly gets that money. And I think when they ask us what they can do for us, we can say, stop taking money from Dominion Resources. It's smelly, it stinks, you don't need the money, and
Absolutely, good point. Sir?
What about the standby fee that Dominion is allowed to charge?
Right, so what the gentleman is referring to is that recently Dominion applied and was approved by the State Corporation Commission to apply a standby charge to any homeowners that had a solar array on their roofs that was 10 to 20 kW. So that's not the smaller projects, it's really just a middle of the road homeowner that might use a little bit more energy. And they were approved, and this would be a $60 a month charge on their bills. This again is just completely outrageous. I use the example that in October, when I didn't run any air conditioning or heating in my home, I don't have solar panels, but my bill was only $30. And so if I had solar panels on my roof, my bill would be $90. It doesn't make any sense. They shouldn't be allowed to be putting in the standby charge, but it was approved by the State Corporation Commission just a couple weeks ago, and it was already written into the law that they were allowed to do that, but it's completely outrageous, absolutely. Sir, in the back?
Talking about that law, is there any way to attack that law? And the reason I ask that, my son and I both have solar, and he's under, on the books, he's under 10, and I'm over 10, barely. I'm not to 11, and he said the way the law was written, it doesn't talk in increments, above, it just talks in whole numbers, and mine is like 10.2, and he said, I shouldn't be, qualified into that because, I'm not to 11, and his is like 9.6, but, it's a total disincentive to anybody to do this because, it helps the environment, and it's, I can tell you personally, it's very costly to do. And, so, is there any way to change that? Because it's a disincentive to anybody going forward to look at it.
So the SEC's ruling, the good news for you at 10.2 is that the way that the SEC ruling came out is that it's unfortunate, but it's better than $60 is that you actually will qualify for probably a $3 standby charge a month. But it's still a ridiculous thing either way to occur. The other answer is that the solar industry, and do you want to jump in? And
well, you could go.
So the solar industry is looking for a legislative fix to this, but the problem that exists, and I think Chelsea's mentioned this over and over, is the moment that Dominion actually gets something that they want, it becomes extremely hard to repeal that. So it's going to be a very tough push to try to get it. There's several different issues in regard to solar power, though, where there is actually some opportunity to be able to push Dominion and to be able to push the legislature. For example, there's a company called Secure Futures. Eric Curran's not here today, is he? Okay. So there's a company called Secure Futures that's based out of Stanton. They just did a very large project with Washington and Lee University that will allow Washington and Lee to get a bunch of their energy from solar power. Dominion sent them a cease and desist letter in August, and their cease and desist letter said, you're not allowed to do this because you will not be meeting 100% of Washington and Lee's energy from renewable sources. And the way the code is written right now, and as interpreted by Dominion, is the only way that you can provide power for an organization or an industry or a commercial entity is if you can, with renewable energy, is if you can meet all of their needs through renewable energy, so 100% of their power. Well, let's think about it. There are intermittency issues and things of that nature. And the monopoly system that we have in Virginia makes it extremely difficult to sort of break in. So the solar industry is looking at some fixes for that, and I think there are some real opportunities to be able to utilize really what is an overreach by Dominion to be able to get some reforms on things like the standby charge and fixing the PPA issue. This existing system in Virginia doesn't allow, and doesn't actually, and there are some utilities that offer 100% renewable energy resource. Those don't actually exist in Virginia, aren't in Virginia, and aren't operating in Virginia right now. And the way the law is written, there's a problem with that, and they're precluded. And ODEC, the cooperatives, and the utilities have been able to effectively preclude those folks from actually coming in at this point in time because you have other transmission issues and other things.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, sorry. I mean, so what Jared's saying is basically, so the Dominion is getting, again, they're getting $38 million to meet an RPS that they're not meeting with renewables in Virginia, but then they're also stopping anyone else from trying to build renewables in Virginia. You know, and this is all happening within the span of a few weeks. It's just been, it's outrageous that the utilities are allowed to continue to get away with this, and that's why we think that these two bills are just so important, and they are baby steps. I mean, at the end of the day, we would much rather see a mandatory renewable portfolio standard, but this is what we have, this is the statute that we have, and we need to fix it so that this doesn't continue. Are there any questions, sir?
Sort of a political statement. I don't think anybody's going to be able to really do a lot unless there are enough people back in the General Assembly to make a difference. My little plug is that I've been trying to get a workshop for people that are interested in running for legislative offices held in the Norfolk area, Virginia Beach, taught by a group called Democracy for America. I printed out before I drove up 50 copies of a flyer that I put in the other room. If anybody knows anyone who's interested in their location in running for a legislative office, it's a great program to start. We have to get at least 50 people that are interested in it so that they'll actually have the class in Virginia, but we need to teach people how to take back the General Assembly in order to get anything done. Otherwise, it's a matter of beating our heads against the wall again. So
Thank you for
if
that
there are people
information.
here in this place that are interested in running, or you know anybody, get them to get ready. You've got 2 years for the House.
Sir?
Yeah, this is probably common knowledge, but I don't know. How common is it to have this sort of a monopoly system for a utility? Do most states have that?
Actually, no. Well, put it this way, it's common in the South. So all of our northern brothers have a deregulated market, and so what that means is that profits are decoupled from generation. So from Maryland all the way up, the utilities in those states, operating in those states, do not own the generation facilities. So they have the customers, but they have to buy power from the folks that own the generation. And so Dominion has actually gone in, they've bought up a ton of generation plants in New England. They're now one of the largest energy providers in New England because they've gone and bought up a bunch of old coal plants, especially in Massachusetts, which they're shutting down and converting. So it is a different system. But in the South, we're all a regulated market where our utilities are allowed to make profit. They own their generation, and owning the generation, that's where all that profit comes from. I mean, it's a lot of money to be made in building facilities, and so that is very common down here. But like I said, up north, it's much different. So.
I thought the power companies were required to buy any excess power produced by individuals or. The reason I'm asking this is because I was told this summer that the Vanderhyde, I don't know if you know anything about the Vanderhyde farm,
I know.
the cattle farm, and they're producing power now from the cow manure, and I was told by a doctor at Virginia Tech last summer that they're producing quite a bit of power, but the power company refuses to buy the excess power. You know anything about that?
So if you are part of the system, there's that particular case is because the farm has many different meters, and the way that the law is written in Virginia is that you can only use the power that you generate to meet the power or the needs from one meter. Okay, and then any excess over what you meet, the utility can buy back at the wholesale price of which most of the time is somewhere between 3 and 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you have 5 meters and all told they need 1,000 kilowatts a month, let's just say, and you generate 2,000 kilowatts a month, then on one of those meters, you're covered completely. All the excess is 3 cents a kilowatt hour you get to sell back, and then you have to buy the power that's being used on those other meters at the retail cost, which for a farm is about 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour right now. If for 1 meter, yes, they do have to buy it back, but if you are attempting to aggregate it at all, they don't have to participate in those programs at all.
But isn't that tax dollars that did all that for the Vanderhats?
No and yes. I mean, it's a very complicated issue. The reasoning behind the utilities saying that that they shouldn't have to be able to do it is because the utility pays for the interconnection between the different meters. So when the utility pays for the interconnection between the different meters, the utility is able to make the case to the State Corporation Commission successfully that it's an unfair subsidy to those people who don't use solar power for you to be able to use that aggregate and everything. So they are trying to make the case that we are actually subsidizing the solar company because you're having to pay for it either, or the solar consumer because you're having to pay for it either way. We have argued several times that that's actually not the case. The State Corporation Commission is actually undergoing a study right now to look at this question of cross subsidies and who is subsidizing who. We're pretty confident that it's going to come back and it's actually going to show that the solar people are subsidizing us versus us subsidizing them, which hopefully will lay the groundwork for that situation to be solved. But there's a lot of questions that remain or that are asked by the General Assembly, and the other secret to the whole, and I know Chelsea and Lisa would agree with this, the other secret to the whole system, solar is actually a rather complex issue, even though it shouldn't be. And the moment that legislators get questions in their head, we've lost them. Because most of them can't process what we're asking them to process. And so that's the other challenge that we have is we actually need some of that data to come back from the State Corporation Commission to say, so those questions that Dominion's always asking you to ask, actually you have the answers to already.
If the private homeowners and business owners install, say, a gigawatt of solar and wind and so forth, that wouldn't, and they were all connected to the grid, that wouldn't go toward their voluntary renewable portfolio standard, would it?
If the homeowner owned it, you're saying?
Well, suppose we had a rash of building of solar panels around the state, hundreds of megawatts. That wouldn't help Dominion meet their goals at all.
Right. Unless Dominion entered into a power purchase agreement with those folks for their energy. The way the RCS works is that they have to generate it themselves, or they have to buy the renewable energy credits, or they have to enter into a power purchase agreement for the energy itself.
Well, there would be the 3.5, the wholesale rate for all of those, presumably, all the all the building owners.
No,
and
because the
homeowners.
homeowner owns those renewable energy credits. It's the homeowner's power. They own the renewable energy credits that are generated from that system.
But isn't Dominion buying it back?
They are, but it's not a they're not buying it back. It's really complicated. I mean, I can just tell you right now that all of the solar panels in Virginia that are on residential or commercial buildings are not part of the RPS.
So if Dominion, so if you generated that much electricity, for every 100 kilowatts that's generated, that earns a REC, and if you sold that REC, the value of that REC to Dominion, then it would help Dominion meet the RPS. If you don't sell it, then it doesn't help them. So you can, and there's very few places left that you can do this, but when you have solar on your house, if you have enough and you actually earn a REC, then you can sell that REC to, say, Maryland, or you used to be able to sell it to Maryland. You can't sell it to Maryland anymore, but you can sell RECs to people, and that's another thing that helps drive down the cost of solar. But most states have started limiting your ability, limiting the ability of utilities to buy out-of-state RECs. I think DC is the only place that we can still sell RECs.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, okay.
DC has locked everybody out. It's just DC as of January 31st of this week.
Okay, we have 5 more minutes, so that's probably 2 to 3 questions. Kathy?
You were talking about the $38 million that Dominion gets. Where do they get that from? What pool of money?
They get that from ratepayers.
But how?
It's added on to the base rate that we pay for electricity.
Everybody.
Everyone except for large industrial rate classes.
All right, so because they are meeting their voluntary RPS, they could charge the ratepayers more for that.
They get a bonus. It's a half percentage bonus.
The bonus comes from the ratepayers.
We pay it.
Right, and so then they are also getting extra money if ratepayers say they want all their power to come from green sources, right? Renewable? Is
Well,
that a different layer?
that's a program that Dominion runs. And so
Right.
they have their green power program that you can voluntarily opt into. And they have the 100% or the 50% option. But again, none of that power or energy is coming from Virginia, and it's administered by a company who's based in California. So, and half of the money goes to administration costs.
How much money is that?
I don't think they release it. People have been trying to find out what is actually, if you buy into that, people want to know what power am I buying, and we haven't been able to get reports from them saying what it actually is, what you're buying.
But I will just to actually put in a plug. Last year, Chesapeake Climate Action Network worked on developing a voluntary solar resource funds. And what this is that it's a fund that's administered by Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy. And this fund is to help homeowners put solar panels on their roofs. The fund was opened in July to start receiving donations from the public, and they can start putting out the loans next July. And so what we tell people is that since we don't know what's going on with Dominion Green Power Program, but we know that it's not supporting renewables here in Virginia, we know that the Virginia Solar Resource Fund is. And so if you're interested in putting money towards green energy, I really hope that you would consider putting money into the voluntary resource funds for solar instead of through Dominion's Green Power Program. And that's my plug.
Since Dominion has this monopoly system, have we thought of attacking them from the right, maybe appealing to the Tea Party wing with, a buzzword like deregulation, and just kind of dismantling them that way?
I mean, I would think that the thing is that, so the Tea Party would latch on to the $38 million price tag, right? I mean, they'd be outraged.
And they'd probably latch onto something like deregulation instead of government monopoly.
The problem is that they would take it a step further than we are, and they would say, So you should be getting rid of the renewable portfolio standard altogether, you know? So, I mean, that would be a little tricky. We'd hate for that kind of language to start getting out there. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, what's happening now, we're not getting back to the original intent of the law, and so maybe we should revoke it. But the problem with that is then we're back to square one, and we should just try to fix it and then move on to a mandatory RPS down the road. But if we completely revoke it, then it's going to be much harder to pass later on.
I was thinking more as like the entire power system. Like if,
That is a huge lift.
well, I know,
They actually tried to deregulate. They deregulated for 10 years, and then in 2007, when this RPS started, they said, "Oh, we don't like this. We want to go back." And so they're doing this it's actually like a quasi-regulated market because they have to do this integrated resource plan and providing a lot of details. That's very complex, but Virginia tried deregulation is really the bottom line for 10 years, and the utilities said they didn't like it.
so now it's an unregulated monopoly.
I know, I'm simplifying it.
Yeah, because I was with an industrial company that actually took advantage of it, and deregulation actually cost us an arm and a leg. And if
Our
it was
rates will
not
go up.